I cannot believe that I read this many books in October, and I hope that you have a drink so you can get through this super long video and my thoughts on my October reads. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to go over all the books that I read in October and also the books that I started middle of this week whenever November hit, what I've read and what I am currently reading as well. Just make sure that you like and subscribe to this video. Also make sure you check out my description box below where you'll find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, Pango Books account, and even Patreon. So let's get into all the books that I read in October. Now, I have to have my phone here because I don't remember all the books that I read because I don't own all physical copies. But the book that we are starting off with is actually a series, a 5-book series, and that is the Awakens series by Elise Kova. I started off October with listening to this on audio where it had all 5 books combined, and I went through them so fast. I absolutely devoured these books. It is a YA fantasy romance. There really isn't anything in the book that's not already been done in a typical YA fantasy romance, but what I really loved about this book were the characters, the found family aspect, the way that our female main character and male main character did have romantic feelings for each other, but what they went through to be together was really, really written very well. That's a tongue twister. It was written very well. I like that there were ups and downs, there were challenges that they faced. It wasn't just an easy, we're in love, we're together, that's that. It was trial after trial being ripped apart and pulled together, and it just kept ripping my heart out. Now, I absolutely loved the world building in this. I loved the pacing. I loved the way that the characters interacted. All the side characters I found myself loving as well. The only reason why some of the books didn't get 5 stars was because I felt like there was a lack of plot development throughout the books. Not necessarily that that's a bad thing, because I know that you're building character relationships, you're building attraction between the male character and the female main character, but I just felt like this series went on a little too long, and I felt like once we found out the real reason why all of this is going on, why there's a war and everything, it just seemed like we drug that out so long that I started to lose interest towards the end of book 4 and into the final book of book 5. But overall, I gave this series 5 stars. Some of the books I gave 4 stars to, some of them I did give 5 stars to, but overall I would say this series as a whole was a 5-star, because now being the very beginning of November, I am still thinking about this world and still thinking about these characters, and that is one thing that I can say was done very well, is it made you love the characters and the found family and everything about that. So definitely pick it up if you like YA fantasy romance, and if you want something that will keep you interested, where you want to keep reading or you want to keep listening, and where you keep picking up the next book because you need to know what happens. There are parts that are not fully fleshed out. There are parts where, it does get a little bit, in a lull. But for the most part, I think that anybody who loves YA fantasy romance will definitely enjoy this series. So the next book that I ended up reading in October was Sword Catcher by Cassandra Clare. This book is her first step into adult fantasy. Everybody has been waiting for this. I haven't really read from Cassandra Clare much before. I think I've dabbled a little bit into Mortal Instruments, but not a whole lot. So I don't know what her writing style is for her YA series, but this book was on my most anticipated reads of 2023 because reading the synopsis and what it was about really had me invested. I was very shocked at not liking this book. I could not stay in it. I don't know if it was the writing or the way the plot went or the development of, just everything around the characters, but I just found myself not invested. You're following our male main character who, at a young age in an orphanage, is ripped from the orphanage and trained to be the sword catcher of the crown prince to keep him safe. So basically, he is supposed to be a body double anytime they go to like major functions or things where the prince could be in harm's way. So if somebody tries to assassinate the prince, he instead would be the one that would be assassinated. He's trained in the palace for years. He does become close with the crown prince and other people that are in the palace. He does a very good job of, and I love that aspect with him, and because he didn't know like proper etiquette or court intrigue or anything, so he had to go through so many lessons to learn how to be the actual prince. And I found myself intrigued with that. I was wanting to know more about what he had went through, but our female main character comes from a different part of the city or the kingdom where she, I think, does like magical remedies, like heals people, different things like that. And their paths cross, and now they're kind of caught up in, these court politics and what's going on around them and trying to stop certain things from happening. The thing that kept pulling me out was I just felt like the writing was dry. I don't feel like there was emotion in there. I don't feel like there was depth to the characters or anything. I feel like the world building really overshadowed the plot and the characters and all of that. I felt like this was a very slow read. I just kept, putting the book down and walking away, and I had no enjoyment or interest in picking it back up, and that was a sign for me. I debated DNFing this book multiple times, but I kept pushing through because I was like, you know what, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm not enjoying it, so I would just put it down and return to it, and I couldn't get into it. Like I said, the writing was very dry. I felt like the world building wasn't fully fleshed out at all. I feel like even the plot of this story wasn't really, fleshed out. I really don't even fully understand where we're going after this. The romance is not believable at all between our two main characters. I feel like it's more forced. It's like, okay, you're the male main character, you're the female main character, you have to be together, is how I feel like they are written. Like I said, there's no emotion. I don't feel for any one of these characters. I started to in the beginning with our male main character because I was like, okay, you've been through a lot in your life, ripped from an orphanage, so of course you have no family, and then you are trying to navigate your world, your way through this whole like court and politics and being the prince. So I was invested very early on, but that quickly dissipated, and then I got to a point where I was like, I don't know where you're going with this. I don't understand why there's no depth to your words or emotions. And all in all, guys, I gave it a 1 star. I know there are people out there that absolutely love this book and cannot wait for the series to continue. And you know what? That is amazing because you took from the story things that I just didn't fully understand or that I didn't see. And, not everybody's going to love all the same books, but I have noticed a lot of my friends and other booktubers and everything kind of feel the same way that I do. Maybe not on the same level, but there's a lot of them out there that are saying this is not good. This was not, a wow book that makes you want to keep reading. So in the end, I'm definitely not going to be continuing this series. But if you ended up loving it, I'm very happy for you. Please let me know in the comments below if you did end up reading this book. Alright, so let's move on to the next book that I read. So I ended up picking up a thriller from an author who I had read from before, only one time, and that was the only thriller I've ever read in my life. But the author is Lisa Jewell, and I ended up reading None of This Is True by her. And I had been seeing this floating around, you know, TikTok and BookTube and everything. People talking about how the plot twist was amazing, how it really, you know, shook them. None of them know what's true. And so I was like, I need to know what happens. I need to get in here so I can talk to my friends and other people about this book. So I started reading it, and instantly Lisa Jewell's writing just sucks me in. I definitely love the way that her, you know, story flows. I love the way that she develops the characters. And I really especially love the fact that, you know, whenever you are in the thoughts of the character that you are reading about, it feels as if, you know, like you are them, and like you could have these same thoughts. You could be this same person going through this. And that's what I really enjoyed. But you're following two women who have never met before in their life. They both have birthdays on the same day. They both turned 45. So they end up meeting in this pub type of thing over in England. And one of them is a successful podcaster. The other one, you know, is kind of like a stay-at-home wife, really doesn't have much going on in her lives. And they cross paths. Now, one of them becomes kind of obsessed with the other one, like Googling them and, you know, just diving into their, you know, past and what they do and who they are. And whenever you're in her thoughts, she keeps crossing paths with this lady. Like, she keeps putting herself there. So at some point you're like, okay, this one's crazy, right? Because she is almost forcing a friendship, if you will. But then you get the other female main character, and she's doing the same thing. She's constantly thinking about this other woman, wanting to know her, who is she, all of these things. And so they end up teaming up. They end up starting to do a podcast and everything about one of the girl who is like a stay-at-home wife, her life, right? And so, of course, our podcaster woman, she is like, oh, this is going to be a great series. Let's keep talking. So they keep meeting up. Their friendship keeps growing and getting deeper. And then things start getting weird. And of course, you know, she's like, okay, maybe we need to stop doing this. I don't think we need to keep going on. And I'm not going to really run it for you, but weird things do happen. And then towards the end of it, you find out that one of them, you know, basically wasn't even telling the truth the whole time. So the other one feels, you know, kind of hurt and wronged by it, and then ends up kind of like outing that person. And then you get to the even further to the end, and things take an even bigger twist. By the end of the book, I was like, I don't even know what's true. I do not know what to believe. It was a great book. I absolutely loved this story. I did give it 4 stars. And I didn't give it 5 because it wasn't a book that sticks with me where I'm like, oh, I just need to, you know, keep talking about this and, you know, branch out into like Reddit forums and everything else like that to see what people have came up with. It was a great book. It shook me. It did what it was supposed to do, but it wasn't one of those like outstanding reads that I need to, you know, read again or anything, but it definitely was worth my time. So if you love thrillers and you love kind of a twisty, turny event where by the end of the book you're just reeling and you have no idea what's going on, pick up None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. You will not be disappointed. And the next book that I did pick up in October was Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. This book is the first book in the War of Lost Hearts trilogy. And of course, I'm a huge Carissa Broadbent fan since I read the Crowns of Nyaxia duology. So I wanted to read her backlist on this. Everyone says that it's great and amazing. It's kind of like a fantasy romance, but with a lot of action and a lot of plot and world building. So I was like, okay, I'm going to dive into it. You are following our female main character who basically is a slave, and she is trained to entertain guests, not sexually, but entertain guests and everything. And she is wanting to earn her freedom. So her master says if you get 1,000 gold, which is a lot of money in this, kingdom, then you can earn your freedom. So our girl, over the course of like 5 or 8 years, ends up getting 1,000 gold. So she goes to buy her freedom because she has this magic, and she met this lord along the way where he is from across the sea, where there are these orders, and she wants to learn more about her heritage, who she is, about her magic. So she's going to buy her freedom so she can set sail, go over there, and, kind of just discover who she is. And whenever she goes to buy her freedom, things don't go the way that they're planned. And now she's fleeing for her life. She does end up over across the seas at the Order, and then finds out that they are not what she thought they were. And now she is bound to them, and she is working with a guy named Max, who is very reluctant on wanting to train her, but he does in the end. And then their friendship starts growing, which is great. But then she starts finding out more about the orders, blood pacts, and all of these things. Well, finally, towards the end, she does end up making a blood pact with the orders, saying, if you go over to the kingdom that I came from, help me free the slaves, then, I am yours for 3 years for this war. But whether I die or live, Max, is set free and no longer under the orders' restrictions. So they agree to this. And of course, Max is upset with her, but then he finds out, that basically she bought his freedom. And so he's like, of course the romantic part starts happening where you can tell she likes him, you can tell that, he likes her. And so we are off trying to free the slaves, going through, all of this plot development, character development, side characters that come in the way. And I will say, I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely didn't grip me like The Crowns of Nyaxia did. And I wonder if that's because either A, this was like one of her first, works that she had done, so she wasn't developed as a writer yet, or just knew how to, really flow with the characters like The Crowns of Nyaxia are, or if it's definitely because this is not very romance heavy, it's very fantastical heavy, where you are just learning about the world and the plot and all the intricacies. And, as much as I love that about fantasies, I gotta have romance in my books, even just a little bit. And even though there is romance towards the end of it, there really isn't a whole lot, right? So I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series. I definitely want to know what happens with our main girl, what happens with Max, what happens with the world and all the slaves. And I'm hoping that the romance starts budding a little bit more than it has. But I am intrigued enough. I just gave it 3 stars because I felt myself not fully invested in the story, because I felt like there were a lot of plot holes and the development wasn't very well done and the pacing seemed to be off in certain parts. But overall, I definitely can plan on continuing. So if you haven't read the War of Lost Hearts trilogy by Carissa Broadbent, definitely do that, because I feel like you can see as a writer how she has developed and how she has become even better at developing her worlds and her characters. And I absolutely loved this. I felt like it's a very strong book if it was one of her very first. And then the next book that I picked up after Daughter of No Worlds was Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown. I decided to put this on my October TBR because I am part of Becca and the Books, her Patreon Alpha Ho Book Club, and this is the new series that we have picked to read. So October was the first book in this series, which is Savage Lands, and of course, I had a copy of it and I was like, let's just dive into it. Let's see what this whole world is about. And I was not disappointed. Not at all. So you're following our female main character, where she was raised in the palace alongside, the heir, and, in the whole court and political intrigue, because her father was a general. And now she's the ward of the king. So her and the prince are like best friends. They're not romantically involved, but as she got older, she started seeing the prince in a different light, where she liked him, wanted to be with him. But our girl needs to get some thrill in, some excitement. So what does she do? Her and the prince end up robbing these trains that travel from one side of the city to the Fae Kingdom. And so she robs them and gives, a lot of the medicine or whatever to the least fortunate of the town. And she does this kind of as a Robin Hood-esque type of situation, like steal from the rich, give to the poor type of thing. But she likes to have her excitement and her adventure. Now, this is set in Budapest, but like a very dystopian type Budapest. And so I don't know, I've never been to Budapest, so I don't know the layout or, the town or anything. But I have heard that it's very well written as far as structures and places within the city. So that's always a good thing. I like whenever books are based on real cities or real areas in the world, but like in a different way, whether it be a dystopian way, whether it be kind of in a, fantastical way. I really enjoy that, because then you see where the author got inspiration for the book and for the surroundings and the world, and that's always a good thing. But our girl ends up getting caught by the Fae and put in this Fae maximum prison. Now, no one knows that she's alive, right? So the prince and everybody else in the kingdom think that she's dead because she got caught by the Fae, and they only know that the Fae are ruthless, that they kill humans, so they all just assume that she's dead. So, of course, the prince is outraged and everything, but we don't know what he's doing because we're always with our girl, right? And so we're in this maximum security prison. She's having to survive. She's having to navigate through all of these criminals. And, of course, the legendary Warwick Farkas is there, and he is not human nor fae. We don't know what he is. But our girl ends up making some allies with people that you wouldn't expect, and just things go from there. There is betrayal, there is talks of sexual assault, there is talks of like abuse, and you definitely need to check trigger warnings, because in the prison it is definitely not a nice place to be. So definitely check trigger warnings before you read this. But I gave this book 4 stars. I loved it. I couldn't wait to get to the second book, which is Wildlands, which is going to be in November, because of course I'm with that Alpha Ho book club, and I definitely don't want to get behind. So I will be reading book 2 in November. But this book is not well written. And what I mean by that is, you can tell that this is not necessarily a debut book, but you can definitely tell that the author still needs to grow in her ways and learn, like what she is good at and developing her worlds and stuff, because it's a very fast read, but there's a lot of parts where you're like rolling your eyes, or you're just like, okay, can we get past this? Or this doesn't make sense. But overall, whenever you get through the book, it's wonderful. I devoured it. I loved it. And if you end up picking this up, make sure that you already have book 2 on hand, because you are going to want to jump right in immediately. So finally, the next book that I picked up was another thriller, but it's like a thriller/horror, and that is The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin. Now, this is a very quick read, and if you watch any of my weekly wrap-up vlogs, you already know my thoughts on this book, but I really enjoyed this book. Like, thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it a 3-star. But it's a horror as well, and so I don't do horror. Everyone knows that. But it was good. I found myself like diving in and out of it because I would get spooked out. And this book is not scary, okay? Just because I am scared of literally everything, it doesn't mean that it's scary. But you are following our female main character, who is very popular online as an influencer through her Instagram, through her blogs that she does. She ended up writing a book because she's a therapist, trying to heal and help marriages, from falling apart and keeping them together. And so she wrote a book on it. She became like a bestseller overnight almost. Everyone loves her stuff. And so she doesn't want people to know that in her real life, her and her husband are not doing well. They're on the edge of divorce. She is a fixer, so she's like, I need to fix my marriage. I need to make sure people don't know that my marriage is failing, even though I'm giving them marital advice. So she decides to buy a house, and it's called Blackwood House, which has a very horrific past. The previous owners, 40 years ago, the father of that family ended up shooting and killing his wife and then attempting to kill his daughter, but his daughter did get away. And then he ended up taking his own life. And so for 40 years, this house has sat abandoned. Some people in the town want it to be bulldozed and demolished. Other people just want it to be left alone because most of them knew the family, and they, just kind of want to leave it up kind of as a memorial. So whenever our girl ends up moving in here with her husband, nobody is happy about it in the town, and she slowly starts to learn this. People are mean to her. People want to run her out of town, but she is standing her ground and wanting to renovate this house and everything. So she's blogging about it as, they're living there. And things start happening in the house, but like her cat is getting sick. She's hearing and seeing things. Her husband is becoming more and more aloof and not home. And at her job, people are breaking into her, place of business, and everyone is just mean and cruel to her. And then she starts finding out some secrets that she's trying to uncover, and nobody will talk to her. And it's quite a wild ride. However, the difference from a normal thriller to this is we have a very unreliable narrator. And what I mean by that is we're following her and only her. And so you're getting all of her thoughts and stuff. But as this book goes on, she starts losing it. So then you start questioning, is she even telling us the truth, or is this fake? What is happening? So as the story goes on, it becomes more and more wild. But then at the very end, the twist that came had my jaw on the floor. So it's only like a 280-page book, a very quick read. So if you like thrillers and if you like horror and if you want to know what happens at the end of this book, it is by far the most wild thing I've ever experienced. And I definitely suggest for anyone to pick it up. Anybody needs to pick it up and read this. Don't spoil yourself and go find out from other reviews and stuff what the twist is at the end, because that will run the whole book for you. But definitely go read it. It's a quick read. So if you're a fast reader or you love thrillers, I'm sure you can get through this in almost one sitting. Then I ended up picking up a book that I kept putting off month after month, and it was in one of my subscription boxes last year, and it just never sounded like something that I was going to like, so I just kept putting it off, overlooking it, even thought about unhauling it a couple times, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Now, like I said, I kept putting it off, and I was just like, you know what, it's spooky season. Everybody is raving about this book right now because I think book 2 was just coming out, so that's why everyone was reading it or rereading it. So I was like, let's pick it up. Let's just see what it's about. If I end up not liking it, I can just DNF it. Wow, was I wrong. This book, I ended up giving 4 stars to. Still to this day, I'm thinking about this book. It's not perfect, but by far is it amazing. You are following our female main character, and she is in this world where magic is with tarot cards. So depending on what tarot card you wield is the type of magic that you can wield. For instance, there is a maiden card where if you tap it and you wield it, then you become unblemished and perfect and beautiful and everybody devours you. But the downfall to it is, you lose your humanity, you lose, the way that you feel and your emotions, so you become very callous and hollow. And then there's like a scythe card, where, if you wield that, you can get in the minds of people and make them do what you want them to do. So very cool magic system. At first I was like, I don't know how this is going to work, but it worked very well. Very unique. I had never read a book that has this type of magic system in there, which I'm sure there are books that maybe do on some level, but I hadn't read it. And so I was like, wow, let's keep definitely reading. So in this world, in this kingdom, not only do you have the tarot card magic system, but there is a flu-like virus that is going around, and it targets a lot of children. And whenever children, get over the flu, they end up possessing some type of magic. Now, whenever they are found out that they had overcame the flu and that they have magic, they are rounded up by these people called the Destriers, and they are the king's forces that rounds them up, takes them to the kingdom and to the castle, and you never hear from them again. So you don't know if they're killed, you don't know what happens to them. So our female main character, 10 years prior, she had came down with the flu. Her father is the general of the Destriers, like he runs, all the groups, so he's definitely high up in the court. He definitely sends his daughter to his brother and sister-in-law, so to hide her, so no one knows that she has the flu. When she comes out from having the flu, she has no magic. The downfall that happens to her is she touches her father's nightmare card, and whenever she does, she ends up taking in whatever magic is in that tarot card into herself, and now she has this voice that's in her head that's not necessarily evil, but not good either, and he's always talking with her and, all this stuff. So she keeps that entirely secret. No one knows about the creature that lives in her head. So for 10 years, she stays silent about this, and he keeps her safe. If she's ever in like a life and death situation, he does, end up taking over her body and making sure that she lives through it. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because our girl gets mixed up with one of the guards of the Destriers, and his name is Rowan, and I love him, just gonna say, but he doesn't end up, telling on her for having, been going through the flu and having magic in her blood, even though she doesn't have magic. And so he actually keeps her secret safe because he is part of this really small group of Destriers that are trying to fight back against the king, and they're trying to get all of the cards themselves, because if you get all of the cards and you bring the deck back together as whole, then the mist and everything about the flu and stuff will go away. So they're trying to accomplish it. The king is, for his nefarious reasons, and then of course this little group of, rebellious Destriers are trying to do that as well. So our girl teams up with them, and the story goes from there. We are on a quest. We are trying to find all of these cards because she can see the aura of the cards, so she's very helpful with them. Romance blossoms. I want to say it was a really, really good romance, very well written. In this world, I was just so shook by this. The plot, the pacing, the way that the magic system is fleshed out, the way that the characters are fleshed out, the way that there is this found family aspect. So I was like, why did I put this off every single month? I could have enjoyed this long ago. I'm glad that I did put it off, though, because then I did end up reading the second and final book in this, which I will get to that here in a little bit, because I couldn't wait. I needed to know what happened. So if you are on the edge, or you want a gothic upper YA fantasy romance, definitely pick this up. The magic system's unique. The storyline is unique. I feel like Rachel Gillig really hit this out of the park for her. And then I ended up picking up the most anticipated book of probably a lot of people here on BookTube or across Book Talk, and that is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This book just released on the 24th of October, and I pre-ordered the UK edition because I just love the design on this, so it came a couple days after the 24th, but I already had it on audio, so I ended up listening to it on audio. So this is the third and final book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. And it's the ending that everybody has been waiting for. We wanted to know what happens to all of our characters. But if you are unfamiliar with this series as a whole, you are following Evangeline, who definitely has been heartbroken, and the love of her life is going to marry somebody that she doesn't want him to marry. She ends up praying to one of the Fates, who is the Prince of Hearts, and asks him to save, her from being heartbroken and stop the wedding. But in return, now she has to give him 3 kisses to people who he chooses. And things don't always go the way that you want them to. Never barter with a fate is what we learn. And then later on, we meet up again with our Prince of Hearts, who is also known as Jax. And if you've read Caraval, you know who Jax is. You already know what he's about and his reputation and his personality. But if you hadn't read Caraval, it's okay. You don't have to. But I feel like the little Easter eggs and knowing Jax and stuff would definitely be more helpful if you read the Caraval trilogy first, because this is set in the same world. So we end up seeing our girl get sent to the north for Nocta Neverending, I think is what it's called. And it's a party time where the crown prince is supposed to pick a wife. And until he does, the party just keeps going on. And Jax is there, and now things go crazy. She ends up wrapped up in this whole political war and trying to stop different fates and things. So our girl's on for a ride. She's on for a ride. So this is the third and final book. I can't give you too many thoughts about it without spoiling it. So definitely go watch my last week's vlog whenever I do give my spoilery thoughts on there. And then there is a timestamp if you want to move past and see my thoughts as well on there. That's non-spoilery. But this book was so good. I did give it 5 stars because I absolutely love the characters and the world and everything in Stephanie Garber's writing. However, if you have seen anybody talking about this book, you definitely know that it was a huge letdown whenever it comes to the story. Some things are never answered. Characters who were introduced in the first and second book never come back in the third book. And I just feel like the plot wasn't very well done. I feel like things were rushed. I feel like there were a lot of parts that were just drawn out far too long just to make it a thicker book. I feel like this could have been like a duology and wrapped up very easily. But anyway, we return to the world. We return to Jax and Evangeline and Apollo and everybody else involved. And I will say, the ending was a little bit of a twist, but it wasn't a jaw-dropping twist. You definitely knew how the outcome was going to be. So I was a little let down, but overall it's 5 stars because I'm still thinking about it. I still love it. I will still return to this world. And from the way that everything ended in the epilogue, I'm pretty sure there's going to be more books written in this world, just like the Caraval trilogy, just like the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Now we're going to see what characters she is going to move on with. So I'm pretty excited for that, but this is a really good trilogy in itself. It's so whimsical. It's so fairy tale-like. It is just worth a read. Pick it up. I loved it. So then the second to last book that I read in October was Roleplaying by Kathy Yardley. This book is a adult contemporary romance, and it was very unique in the way that the story and the plot is, but it definitely hit home for me because of me and my husband's past. But you are following our female main character, who is kind of a recluse. She's an introvert. She's been divorced for 5 years. Her son just went off to college, so she doesn't have any friends, has no interest in making friends. She just wants to be a hermit in her own place because she works from home. And then our male main character, he is, 50, I think, and he, I guess, kind of is a hermit as well. He just moved back home because he's been separated from his ex, who ended up marrying his younger brother, I think, or his cousin, one of the two. So that's kind of a weird thing. But his mother is definitely having some health issues, so he is trying to get her to kind of go over the will and sign over things and kind of just tie up some loose ends. So here we go with this whole story because he's a gamer. He is a part of this guild in this RPG game online with local people. And his mom says that if he brings a date to the wedding of his cousin or whatever, where his ex and his brother will be, then she will discuss the paperwork and the legalities of everything. So he reluctantly agrees. But, you know, he's like, I don't know who I'm going to ask. And then our female main character is told by her son that he will become more extroverted and outgoing if she does. So now she has to prove to him that she is making friends and getting out there and not just staying in the house. So she ends up going to a book club, not loving it. She ends up talking to someone because she's a gamer as well. And so she ends up talking to someone and they're like, yeah, there's this guild online. It's a game that she's already played for years and loves it. So she ends up giving her email address to them and she joins this guild, who our male main character is the leader of, but she doesn't know him. So you're watching them play this video game. You're watching the banter happen with everybody in the guild. It was so well done. And then she ends up meeting Otter, is his online name, and helping him because he fractured his foot. And the romance goes from there. It was so sweet. It was so romantic. I did give it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. I really did. I loved it. And I think that if I wasn't a gamer or if it didn't hit so close to home on how me and my husband met, then I probably wouldn't have enjoyed this book as much as I did. I'll be very honest. I feel like this book could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I feel like as the story's going on, it feels like you're just stuck in like a week time frame whenever it's spread over months. So I didn't really enjoy it, but the romance was sweet, and, you know, it definitely kept me hooked whenever it came to the gaming aspect. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't an astounding thing, so if this sounds like something that you would like, if you can relate to any of those aspects, you will love this book. But I feel like as an adult contemporary romance, I feel like it fell a little bit flat for that, and I feel that a lot of people aren't going to like it if you can't relate at all to it. So pick it up if you like. It's a very fast read. It's a very cute, you know, fall, winter time read. So you might end up enjoying it. So those were all the books that I read in October. However, let's talk about the books that I started in November. So the first book that I did start and complete so far in November, which was this week, is Being Henry by Henry Winkler. And, you know, of course, I can't really, you know, rate his memoir, but I'll give it 5 stars because I really enjoyed the book and I really enjoyed listening about his life, how he became an actor, you know, his being fired over and over again as a director, not getting certain parts, which was wild to me, his wife going through cancer. He's just a very wholesome and humble guy, and he'll give you the time of day if he ever meets you. So I was very happy that I ended up reading his memoir, which I ended up listening to it on audio. He narrates it, and he also has parts where his wife comes in and gives her part of whatever, you know, part in their lives they're at. So it was so good. And if I am ever fortunate enough to meet Henry Winkler, I would count myself fortunate because he is such a humble and generous and wholesome guy. And then the next book that I started this week, which is November, and I've already read it, which is Skeleton King by Charity B. So if anybody's been around on my channel a lot, you know that I ended up picking this book up at Half Price Books in Lexington, Kentucky, whenever I went to Authors in the Bluegrass. I knew nothing about this book. I only knew that there was a poem on the back. There wasn't even a synopsis, but I was like, let's give it a try, right? Let's just see what it is. And it sat on my shelf for months. And then I finally picked it up because I was like, it's October, Spooktober, let's read it. And as I was reading what is it called? It is called, let me get to the page. Yeah, it's kind of like the story, the blurb, and then an author's note. So here's where it is. And you guys, I had no idea this was about this, but basically it said, this was a blast for me, and I hope you have as much fun reading this as I had writing it. It is one of my all-time favorite stories, The Nightmare Before Christmas. So this is a dark romance set on the characters from A Nightmare Before Christmas. So I'm like, how are you going to take a children's Christmas movie and make it dark? She delivered, and I did not like it. I did not like it. I gave this book 2 stars. It only got 2 stars because it was like a Jack and Sally reimagining, but like way darker. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys, Jack is a necrophiliac. He will steal bodies from graves. He defiles them as a necrophilia does. And you get in-depth play-by-play of what it feels like, what he's thinking. And I was like, this is how we're starting the book? So he's a necrophilia. And then our Sally character, who is Sarah, she is living in a house with Fink, who's Dr. Finkenstein, Frankenstein. And he she was kidnapped as a child, 9 years old, and grown up in this house, as a servant. And so, he will put her underneath anesthesia and, take off her limbs and sew them back on and stuff. It's very weird. But, whenever she disobeys him, he forces her, she gets raped by his assistant Ingvar and him. So she's raped every single day of her life, and that is terrible. But in some twisted mind, the Stockholm syndrome, she thinks that he loves her, so she still sticks around. So I was like, this is way too dark for me. Way too dark. She's even fantasizing about being with John, who's the Jack, character. Being with John, and she's like, I wish he wouldn't be with the dead bodies. I wish he would be with me. She's so jealous of these dead bodies that he's with. I'm like, what is sick and twisted about this book? You guys, if you like that, if you like that very dark aspect, pick it up. I only kept reading because I was like, okay, surely this has to get better. It does not. It does not get better. It gets even more gross and twisted and sick, and we're just going to leave it at that. I ended up reading it. It's 2 stars. I'm going to be getting rid of this book. So there's that. And then finally, let's talk about the 2 books that I did start this week that I have not finished. Well, let's talk about the 3 books. First, I'm still reading Blood Union Part 1. Here you go. You get to see the picture again, so it's going to be in every one of my videos. So you have that. No updates on it. I haven't read much of it. A little bit, but not anything worth noting. The other 2 books that I have started listening on audio. Oath Taker by Audrey Gray. I'm not very far into this, but from what I understand, it is supposed to be a fantasy romance based on Vikings and Norse mythology, and I can see that. I'm only an hour into the audiobook, so I don't have very many thoughts at this moment. I am intrigued. I am enjoying it, but we're going to see how the book goes, because I know there's 4 or 5 books in the series, and I don't know if I'm going to want to continue or not, so we'll just see how that goes. I have high hopes for Oath Taker because a lot of people seem to love it. And finally, the last book that I finally started, and I am reading it physically, which is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I am only on page 35, so I'm not very far into this. The only thing that I can kind of garner from this is you have Macy, who is our female main character. Her mother dies when she's young, and so her father raises her to the kind of guidance that her mother had left him, and they end up getting a weekend home out of San Francisco, which next door lives Elliot, who is also around her age, and they are friends. You don't get much of their backstory. You just only find out how they meet, and then you are flash forward into present day, and they cross paths again. They haven't seen each other in over 10 years, and so clearly something happened. We will find out what happens, because it is a back then and a now story. So we're going to be kind of going on dual timelines here, and I'm pretty excited. I don't know much more than that, but this is my first dive into Christina Lauren, so I'm enjoying it so far. So let's see how that goes. So those are all the books that I read in October and the books that I started in November and what I am currently reading. Let me know below in the comments, have you read any of these books? Have you wanted to read any of these books? Definitely give me your thoughts and your feelings below. But I am going to have an extra video for you coming out on Tuesday. Hopefully, if I can get that recorded this weekend. I'm having a little bit of an issue with, I have like a stone in my saliva gland and it's hurting, and I had to have a CAT scan today. That's why this video is up late. So let's hope that that gets done and I can just go ahead and film my video maybe tomorrow for Tuesday. But I have quite a lot of books that I've hauled in the past couple of weeks, so definitely stick out for that bonus video. But until next week, guys, I hope you all have a great weekend, a great daylight savings time, because we're rolling back an hour tomorrow, and I'm so excited for that. But as always, leave me your thoughts below, become a Patreon member, and also check out my Pango Books account, because there are some books on there that I have recently unhauled. But I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye!